We need to collaborate. We need to have a voice. We need to get together and say, actually, there are some incredible things going on. You know, it was really difficult to find a category that fitted, and then all of a sudden discovered automotive, and you know, it's an ecosystem that doesn't exist. It's a complete greenfields opportunity, and it's a massive sector. So we were quite shocked and excited once we'd figured out that we could commoditise the service.
I think I got to the point where I realised that I wanted to make decisions and work in a really collaborative environment and not have committees amongst committees and steering groups and change control and all this sort of stuff that really stops you from innovating and actually stops you from seeing results quickly.
It didn't happen overnight, but it did happen under duress.
When we started out, we always made the assumptions that it's all about digital. And when you're in the technology space and your focus is that online channel, you always think about mobile apps, you always think about websites. And you sometimes tend to forget that there's actually a human being on the other end that actually wants to consume a service, or they want to buy a product.
There are some 19 million cars in Australia. Of them, there's close to 1,000 different models. Of them, there's close to probably maybe 9,000 variants. And of them, there's about 12 to 15 services per variant.
Introducing Eden Shirley, CEO, and Barry Pryce, CTO from fixedpricecarservice.com.au for the mental revolution. Interviewed by Chris Hogan.
Excellent. Thanks very much for all you for coming, and thank you so much, Eden and Barry. Thanks very much.
Welcome.
So, Eden, CEO and founder of Fixed Price Car Service, and Barry Pryce, CTO. What was life before Fixed Price?
Fixed Price So I came from a digital agency background, so very marketing. And still own a digital agency. So we founded and created the startup from within the agency, which was, you know, an interesting journey, but yeah, creative background.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And what about you, Barry? What was life like before?
Yep, well, obviously I'm not Australian, as you can probably tell from the first few seconds of the interview. So in Europe, primarily worked in content management for big telcos and banks, and then coming to Australia, worked for 10 Digital Media, helping establish their presence. And previous to Fixed Price, I was doing the digital transformation for RECQ.
Okay.
Hey guys, you'll need to speak up. Like,
Much louder.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yell at us.
Absolutely.
Don't be shy.
Yep.
So, why did you start this project? Why did Fixed Price Car Service come about?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting agency land. You know, it's service-orientated work, but, you know, you have capabilities. So naturally, if you're working on client work and you have, you know, crafted your skills, you start looking around at opportunities. We had done a lot of work in the tourism sector, specifically building very large platform booking sites for large hoteliers and online comparison sites in the hotel space. Loved the model. Had my own challenges around vehicles. I'm not the most mechanically minded individual. I tend to look at the bonnet, under the bonnet, when I need to sell the car to work out whether I need to hose it down. And you know, realistically, coming from Melbourne up to here, you know, not knowing the lay of the land, having these skills in a vertical that is very mature and very competitive. I mean, if you can cut it in tourism, you can cut it in most categories. And I just wanted to take all of that fantastic, dynamic sort of energy and move it to a sector that was either not as developed, not as mature, and where we could make an impact. And it was really difficult to find a category that fitted, and then all of a sudden discovered automotive, and it's an ecosystem that doesn't exist. It's a complete greenfields opportunity, and it's a massive sector. So we were quite shocked and excited once we'd figured out that we could commoditize the service, and that was the journey. That's when the idea sparked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was there failed projects before this one?
Yeah, plenty. Tourism platform, music platform. I could name quite a few. I wouldn't call them fails. I mean, at various stages they made money. At various stages it built up my desire to get involved in the startup space, and it's a category where there's a lot of pain and suffering well before it gets interesting. So you have to build up that appetite, and so they all played their roles. There were 4 of them in total.
Very good, very good. And Barry, why did you get involved?
I think that's a really good question, because I've traditionally come from the large enterprise side of things, a very corporate environment, and I think I got to the point where I realised that I wanted to make decisions and work in a really collaborative environment and not have committees amongst committees and steering groups and change control and all the sort of stuff that really stops you from innovating and actually stops you from seeing results quickly. So when Eden proposed the idea of coming on board to fix Pryce, it was all an unknown, and I didn't really have much to go on apart from Eden's very convincing words to encourage me to move from the corporate into the startup environment.
So Eden wooed you?
You could say that.
Oh, I think there was a couple of
With
beers.
some support.
There was a few sessions at the pub in Burley, and but by the end of it, I was completely sold, and I was convinced that that Eden and the team that he created could make it work. So it was Eden's very good at convincing people.
Very good, very good.
I think that was actually one of the biggest challenges. Gorilla is a business that's been around for 14 years. We've grown the team at various stages from 15 to 30 strong, and we made a decision at the time of getting the funding that we weren't going to dismantle that business to create the new business. So practically had to build a new team. It didn't happen overnight, but it did happen under duress.
Yeah.
Which was really challenging in itself.
So yeah, it started in 2009 with 2 people. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, so the true story here
Good.
is Fixed Price operated out of pretty much not much bigger than a pantry in the agency. It was a mini office that had 2 desks that were right next to each other, and the wall would have been about this far behind the desks. And for at the point where we decided, because we were running it on vapors, you bootstrap something, you run out of cash, business goes on, you've got it ticking along, and when we made the decision that we were going to look to raise capital, we started to invest in staff and started to, so we started with the call centre, and we hired one person to answer the phones, and before you knew it, there was another person and they were making bookings. And in fact, I didn't get a job until year 6 of its lifespan. Yeah.
So, did you lock those developers in that cupboard? Like, what was the?
No. So the developers.
Why was it?
They were the call center operators. So
Okay,
the developers actually were in Gorilla.
Okay.
So basically, my partner in Gorilla and a couple of private investors were the original founders. I'd come up with the idea, I pitched it internally, and then I pitched it to a couple of private investors that I thought would resonate with the idea. They did. It was actually the easiest raise that we've ever done. And bang, we were off, we were building it. It came into the agency just like any other job, except we basically said to everybody, look, this is our own project. And the key point being, you know, it ends when we say it ends. You know, that's the big issue with services work that I just find, you know, you build up that momentum and then all of a sudden it's just like, boom, we're done. The contract's over. It's like, we were just getting started. You know? So everybody got excited about the project and, you know, over, I think the first launch was actually only about 4 months. So we did it quicker the first time. But yeah, no, it was about 4 months and then we launched. And it was very simple, very basic site.
Yeah.
But obviously, you know, what we've since been able to build together is, you know, an amazing piece of tech.
Great. So it was investment first, then launch, not a launch.
We raised seed off the idea.
Okay.
So put together literally a PowerPoint presentation,
Very
found
good.
the right guys, raised the money. It was 200K.
Yeah.
And that was enough to kickstart it. Obviously, it does help if you're a founder that has an agency of, you know, at the time probably about 16 people. But, you know, when you've got 16 staff too, you've got to make money, you've got to feed families. So, you know, it's not like everybody's sitting around waiting to build something.
No.
It went through just like every other commercial job. And, you know, that meant deadlines and meant pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Barry, what kind of stack did it run on and technology did it run on in the early days that you know about compared to what it runs on now? Is it much different?
Yeah, I don't think you could really compare the two. So the original website was hosted out of a partner in the States. I think it was on a single server, which for all the solution architects out there is a big no-no. Now we've got all the right principles in place, full redundancy, full availability. The system can scale to cope with the demand, and we're all sitting in AWS in Sydney, and that's working really well for us so far. So now, if anything goes wrong, we'll usually know about it before it can result in any failure, which is a lot better than getting the phone calls at 1 o'clock in the morning to say your website's not available. So it's definitely sitting on a pretty mature stack now.
Yeah. So those phone calls, should they happen, is there a team there to support it 24/7, or is it pretty robust that you don't need that team?
Yeah, we don't really need a heavy support element. I'm a firm believer in DevOps principles, where the development team are also responsible for the production software as well as releasing it, making sure that everything's working, and it means that they're invested in it. If they can't hand something over to an operations team and say, there you go, you look after that now, it's no longer our problem. Like the dev team have got all the monitoring tools, and they basically look after their own software, and I think that principle works really well.
Excellent. So moving along.
Chris, can we get you to
Raise the volume.
Yeah, volume.
Okay, we'll
People
try.
that can't hear.
We'll try.
Yeah.
I think Barry's yelling.
Do you want me to talk this way?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how that will go for people out there, but yeah.
Okay.
You got mics?
We'll try and talk louder,
Yeah. So
assuming you're editing.
Get a microphone next time.
yeah, we will. So obtaining some extra investment further down the track. So you've run on these vapors. You've run on $200,000 worth of investment for what, 5 years?
Oh, it didn't last 5 years.
Right.
We ran lean and mean
Yeah.
once the initial investment, you know, ran out, and you know, which is, look, every startup's different. You know, some you'll create a social platform or social business, and all of a sudden, you know, it can get or something unique as far as a trick or some app, and it can get massive exposure quickly. Marketplaces, you know, tend to be a bit more of a slow burn to sort of build up that momentum. So in our particular case, a marketplace selling car services is, you know, one of those things where Google probably got more momentum, you know, than the social chatter in the early phases. So it was a longer burn to start.
Yeah.
We had a couple of stumbling blocks early on too, as far as the partnership is concerned. So all of those things made us sort of let it sit for a while and then revisit it when we were ready.
And how did you woo Super Retail Group. How did that work?
Yeah, look, the process. Firstly, it was nothing like I would have imagined. Raising capital is always challenging, but we were very determined, and we put together a really well considered strategy. So we wrote a fair amount of material, both regarding our strategy, which wasn't a single vertical strategy. We had four revenue divisions, so our strategy is quite diversified. The product that you see as a retail customer is only one pillar of what is four distinct revenue streams. So we wrote an extensive strategy around that. We did have the benefit of what were very strong metrics in the business. So although the volume wasn't there, the metrics were, and we also had the benefits of just a very large market sector that was undeveloped, and we could model, I guess, our projections both off our metrics, which were credible, and then other market sectors that had similar characteristics. So, for example, the tourism. As it turns out, those assumptions weren't necessarily correct, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. But fundamentally, we could provide a very clear and very distinct story, and we had the capability and the know-how to deliver on that. So we packaged it up, and then we went, and believe it or not, we wrote a list of probably 70 odd contacts that we wanted to engage, and they ranged from institutional investors to strategic investors to people that we knew in our network, through to startup funds and private equity and various other things. And you get a really mixed response. It's not it's exciting raising money because you've got that incredible optimism in your step, and you just know that and a lot of people will say wonderful things when you're pitching. It's like, that's great, amazing business, but when it comes time to sign a check, it needs to be more than just a pat on the back, obviously. Super Retail Group was an interesting one because you're talking about a really sizable organisation, and you're talking about a different organisation to what we're offering. I think the guys there, they're clever operators, very personable, and super helpful. So we felt a really good connection with them, and I don't know, I don't hear people talk about the connection enough, but it's really important to have strategic alignment, obviously capacity in your partner, an opportunity that they can contribute more than just cash, which is always preferred, and then a good connection between directors. I mean, ultimately you're going into business together. You need to be able to collaborate to really be effective in the partnership. So there was a good connection with SRG. And as a result, they invested, which was, a wonderful day.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was actually on the 24th of December, 2014. So it was a good Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Beautiful.
My poor wife got I said, "Oh, sorry, I'm leaving right before Christmas, but I'll come back."
Not leaving for good.
No, I had to run up to Brisbane, obviously. It's quite a lengthy drive. It's about an hour and a half.
I've got the investor I need. I'm leaving.
No. Scratch that bit.
Beautiful. So, how much has the system and maybe the business plan evolved? Barry, I'll throw that to you because we've said that the stack's changed and all the rest of it, and I'm not really talking about technology. I'm talking about, I guess, what the view for maybe features or whatever it is you want to term it. How much has that evolved from maybe the original idea, and where do most of these great ideas come from?
Yeah, I think when we started out, we always made the assumptions that it's all about digital, and when you're in the technology space and your focus is that online channel, you always think about mobile apps, you always think about websites, and you sometimes tend to forget that there's actually a human being on the other end that actually wants to consume a service, or they want to buy a product, and I think quite early on we realised that it wasn't all about digital.
Or more importantly, self-service.
Yeah, self-service. So we had an online transaction that was purely from give your information, book, get your email, you go and get your car service. And what we actually found was that through the contact centre, they actually got in touch with people and actually helped them through the process, talked to them. A lot of people were uncertain what it was all about, like how does this comparison website work? What's involved? And that was a sort of eureka moment where we realised that there was a really large human aspect to this that we had to maintain and we had to implement. And it was at that point we really ramped up the contact centre and their ability to work with or liaise with our customers and help them through the process.
So what might be the process actually, for those that haven't actually gone onto the website and put their details in, what does a process actually look like? I'm looking for a mechanic, I've got X brand car.
Before you answer that, I just want to preface how big this is. There are some 19 million cars in Australia. Of them, there's close to 1,000 different models. Of them, there's close to probably maybe 9,000 variants. And of them, there's about 12 to 15 services per variant. So it's a very large database or solution. And it's incredibly complicated. Nobody knows how to service their cars. Most people barely know what to put in to the search engine to even identify what car they've got, let alone identify what services they need. So that was a fairly big challenge to deal with out of the gate.
Yeah, I mean, what we're dealing with here is extremely large data sets. Not only within the schedules themselves, there's actually parts that are involved in the schedule, and we need to know that right part is going to cost this much money, and that then all adds up together into something that looks really simple at the end of the day, which is a price. But deriving that price is extremely difficult.
And do you get it wrong?
We try not to get it wrong because we tend to honour our.
We should quickly clarify how the site works.
Okay.
So you can't ask a small to medium business owner to price 30,000 different products. Yep. And let's assume that it's 30,000. So what we have to do is we pull in manufacturer repair data, which basically says you drive this vehicle and at all of the service intervals you need to do all of these tasks, and this is how long each one of those tasks take. And then we go to the parts companies and we go, we need to marry up all of these parts with all of these services, and we'll get the recommended retail pricing of each part. And then we say to the workshop, how much do you charge per hour and what markup do you want on recommended retail? And then we calculate all the pricing on their behalf. It was the only way that we could, and this was what I was talking about as far as the puzzle of solving how to commoditize the service. And that's why most service businesses, you put in your name and details and you get 3 quotes the next day. We wanted to create a true e-commerce booking portal where you could go, I want this service, it's going to cost this much, and I can book it right now and know what I'm going to pay.
Yeah.
So that fundamentally, that was our greatest challenge, and in fact is today our greatest asset. It's the biggest barrier to entry as far as somebody coming into the marketplace, and it allows us to do some of the things I won't talk about tonight, but it allows us to do some really, really fantastic and clever applications because we can predict the cost right down to a suburb. If you live in Paddington in Sydney, we can tell you what you will pay for your service compared to somebody that lives on the Gold Coast in Service Paradise, and it's accurate. Yeah.
Excellent. So then someone goes in, gets serviced, they come out and they get a phone call, is that right? Is that what you were explaining to me? How does that customer service model or that call centre team actually fit into the whole scenario?
Yeah, so what we have is an extensive lead generation model where up front, before we actually show someone the price for the car service, we'll capture their name, their email address and their telephone number. And what we'll typically do is within 5 to 10 minutes of someone actually being a lead on the website, we have a call center application that gets all those details, shows the agent exactly what page they were on, and gives them a call and says, "Hey, notice you're on the website looking at a Holden Commodore service. Is there anything I can help you with?" And really help them through that process. And we found that that's been working really well.
Yeah, there's two types of customers. There's the I don't want to talk to anybody and I don't want any help customer, which, believe it or not, is the smaller volume. And then there's the I don't know what I'm buying customer, and if somebody calls me up, I really appreciate it. And it's like, yeah, okay, explain it to me. And I guess this was the big epiphany. I mean, Barry didn't sort of trumpet their horn as far as how they've approached things, but at Fixed Pryce, every person in the business can contribute ideas to the development process. There are challenges that run within the business on a regular basis, and there is a collaborative environment where, and in fact, the idea to call customers while they're on the website came from, one of the team members outside of the IT team that you wouldn't typically go, "Hey, let's talk about innovation," and it was a game changer. I mean, we get 70, almost 80,000 visitors a month come through the site, and a ton of them were coming straight through the door and leaving. And clearly, obviously, they're doing quotes and they're doing their research, but they'd found their answer and for whatever reason didn't book, might have booked direct, might not have known what they were looking at and left. And it took just that simple idea of somebody saying, why don't we try and give them a call? And then we did that the next day, and the conversion rates were really low, and everybody nearly pulled away from the idea. And then somebody said, and I'll never forget it, why don't we just call them when they go in the database? And everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people in the room said, "Oh no, people will hate that. That'll never work." Honestly, the conversion rate tripled almost overnight.
Awesome.
I mean, instantly. It wasn't overnight. And fundamentally, to have an environment where anybody feels that they can contribute an idea regardless of how ridiculous it sounds, and then obviously to be recognised for that, I think is really important. And much to Barry's testament, he's created that environment.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So before I dive into the last two questions, I want to ask for questions from the audience. I'll have to repeat them, so please keep them simple enough for my mind to digest. Any questions or comments?
Car warranties. How would you deal with car warranties?
Car warranty.
Sorry, how do you deal with car warranties?
How do you deal with car
That's simple
warranties?
enough, I can say that one.
Car warranties we don't have to deal with it. The government deals with it on your behalf. The truth is that your warranty is valid if you have your car repaired by a qualified mechanic as per the manufacturer's schedule using quality parts. Any dealer that tells you that is not the case is misinformed. The reality is the marketplace is very open nowadays, but it's got a long way to go. The truth is, and it's understandable, retention is very strong in the first sort of 2 to 3 years. If you buy a brand new car, obviously, you love the experience of going into the dealer, but there's a certain point where consumers sort of start to, basically the more mileage you put on the car, the higher the servicing costs, traditionally, or at least the first 3 or 4 years they're fairly low, and then you get a couple of the bigger ticket items. Once people sort of hit those bigger items, they turn to the internet, they start to research, and they quickly discover that they've got a broad range of options. So as far as any warranty claims, our data comes through international supplier that sources the data directly from the manufacturers. So the service schedules are correct. Certainly, we work with some of the local authorities or organisations to vet the mechanics, and they all sign legal agreements to support that they will fulfil the statutory requirements of the servicing. And the final thing is all of our quotes are based on the OE compliant parts, premium parts providers, of which our agreement with those suppliers is that they will adhere to that. So, how many cars do we service under warranty? There's a portion, but the bulk of our customers tend to kick in around the sort of 3 years to 10 years. And typically you'll find that warranties are either towards the end of their cycle. There's a few new ones around nowadays that go out to 7 years, but there aren't, they're fairly new concepts. So, warranties are an open discussion nowadays. And absolutely the way that it's going is that the government is supporting consumers' choice of repairer. If you want a dealer service, absolutely, you should absolutely do that. But if you're inclined to shop around as an owner of a vehicle, you should have that right.
Any more?
Yeah. Your registration or identifying the car and the make and the year, etc.
Yeah.
Can you pull that up out of the registration?
I can't wait.
So identifying the car,
Yeah.
the year, the make. Can you pull that up?
So can you
by
do
the
a rego lookup?
Registration, yeah.
So yes, the technology's there. The government has centralised the databases to the best of their ability. So these are the state-based databases, and they have released those databases through a supplier which currently services the insurance companies. They haven't allowed anybody outside of the insurance category to access those databases, but it's anticipated in the next 12 months that other companies, public companies and listed companies will be able to access a central database. So it will be as simple as going, number, letter, bang, we can pull up your vehicle, and in some cases even more information. Nothing, particularly noxious, but it'll certainly simplify consumers' ability to identify the car. Because if you identify the wrong car, then it makes it very difficult for us to provide you accurate quoting. And at the end of the day, that's what you need to get a good comparison.
It cuts out all the steps.
It does. We like to make it simple for people, and once that data is released, it will certainly improve things a lot.
Anybody else with comments?
Yeah, what was your aha moment where you actually got the idea and started putting together the concept? Or whose idea was it to start off with?
Whose idea was it?
So I had the aha idea as far as, because the company was founded in 2009. So Barry and I only started working together after we had raised funding. And in fact, the first role that I filled was the CTO role. So like I said, I didn't want to pull, I didn't want to dismantle Gorilla for this opportunity. And we were rebuilding everything from scratch anyway, so it made sense that the CTO was the first key hire. The aha moment, it was a while ago, but it was absolutely that I'd figured out how to, put a price on a service that was, that it's an industry with no common standards, no benchmarks, scattered data. Everybody's working off a different hymn sheet. It's very fragmented, and so once I'd figured out where I could source all of the parts, and I'm not physically talking about parts, there's about 7 different data sources. Once that came together and I knew that I could put a price on a service, I knew that we had something interesting. Yeah.
And so to digress, to segue into another question on that same line, have you had a I've made it moment?
I'm looking forward to having one of those.
No.
I mean, we're still, in a fundamental growth phase. We've got a nice little J starting to reveal itself, but we're certainly not at the tipping point yet where we're on that explosive growth. We certainly are making incredible headway, but I wouldn't. There's no high fives around the office yet. We're still working hard.
And
there's a few high fives, but
It's
mini wins.
small wins every day.
Small wins every day.
And so, has there been a scary moment?
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's the kind of startup world is one of those worlds where you just roll your sleeves up and you know what you're getting in on. You know, you know that you're going to almost push everything out of the way to make this your priority. You know, and you know, family is important, and you know, my other business is important. But you know, you do sacrifice a lot to create a what they call an overnight success. You know, I mean, nobody notices you until it's huge, and then they go, "Oh wow, that's amazing! They built that so quickly." And it's like, no, they didn't. So you know, I think that everybody, that any entrepreneur that I've ever met knows the deal, and you know, I just think you have to expect to work hard.
It's good.
It's part of the journey.
That's a good lesson.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No shortcuts.
any mentors that have helped you along the way? Books, anything that you've...
Yeah, look, I've been lucky. I've had various mentors at different times, particularly individuals, and each bring different things to the table.
How'd you find them?
Look, at various times I have them in my life, and it doesn't mean that you have 4 or 5 at any one time. There are different lessons you need to learn at each stage. You know, I certainly, and it doesn't necessarily mean they've got extensive business experience either. You know, some of the most important influences in my life have certainly just been really, really clever thinkers at times. Others, you know, I've looked to for advice because they've got, you know, a long and colourful business history. So it varies a lot. Varies a lot.
What about you, Barry?
Well, for me, it's usually, like, I rely heavily in the online space. So even things like TED Talks, that I'm really interested in the psychology behind software development and how to actually make really effective teams, and where does innovation come from, and how should you react to failure, and how can you actually become stronger from mistakes that you make. So I look at a lot of TED Talks and a lot of the online videos, online resources is where I kind of get inspiration from.
Excellent. And what's the future of Gold Coast tech industry look like, guys? Is it looking brighter? I saw their office is quite swanky and faster internet connection than most of us probably have combined in Surfers Paradise.
We actually chose the building we're in because it has the fastest internet on the coast.
Excellent.
That was a prerequisite.
Excellent. So yeah, what's the future of the technology sector look like on the Gold Coast? Is it looking bright?
Look, I think I've been on the coast now for 12 years, and it really is going from strength to strength. I've got friends that work in Guvera and a few other tech startups on the coast, and I'm really optimistic and hopeful that they will continue to grow the teams and the companies that are starting to develop here. Probably one note is that we've actually been looking for analysts and looking for more junior people that have come out of uni, and it's actually quite difficult to find people. So I don't know if there's a bit of a vacuum right now coming out of uni.
Mate, if you want to put a job ad up, right now is a good time.
I don't know what they do, but I know there's...
There's a few people here, we don't know what they do.
No, but there's a few people here tonight who walked in who are brand new to the coast in the tech space, so
Yeah.
that are...
I mean, the big issue is that there are 4 significant and a handful of mid-sized startups that have a fair bit of notoriety that need to come together and participate in things like this. We need to bring the community, and I think bringing the agencies into the mix is a fantastic idea, and I fully support this sort of convergence of ideas and collaboration, because at the end of the day, every one of us struggle to bring good talent to the table. None of us, look to sort of recruit locally. Most of the recruits that we've pulled have been either interstate or Brizzy market. It's a small community here, but the more buzz that we can create, the more people will come. It's a beautiful place to live. So if you actually think something's going on, you know, it's a win-win. So we need to collaborate. We need to have a voice. We need to get together and say, actually, there are some incredible things going on. I mean, there's one of Australia's bloody fastest growing startups, or you wouldn't really call them a startup anymore. And I won't name names, but there are some phenomenal tech businesses locally that are doing incredible things. You know, there is definitely some fantastic jobs here. So, you know, I think the more that people can collaborate, the more we'll see people come back. You know, it's a win-win. It's a great place to start a tech business, I think.
Great. Take one more comment. Unless you
look into the future, do you guys actually consider yourself in the automotive space, or would you class yourselves more in the service comparison space?
Yeah, look,
going forward?
we definitely don't classify ourselves in the automotive space. So we used to describe ourselves as a media company. Our understanding of ourselves has certainly evolved. We're behaving now more like an insurance comparison site than, you know, a booking.com style site. So a more personal service, high touch, you know, concierge style service, which, you know, so I certainly think automotive is our category of service provision, but we will eventually, you know, diversify that. It's a big category. You know, we've got plenty of growth before we need to worry about plugging anything on. But yeah, we don't typically call ourselves an automotive company.
Excellent. Well, I'll take this opportunity to thank you both for your time and your voice. And yeah, we're on board with making this place a better place to live and work.
Yeah.
And we'll happily take interviews from anybody that has a good story to tell. And I'm sure you all do. So thanks once again, Eden and Barry. Thanks.